I remember the sound of the clock that night, a heavy, deliberate tick echoing in the silence of my small room, where the desk lamp burned longer than it should have. The paper before me smelled faintly of dust and ink, and my hands were trembling as I counted the first real money I had ever earned. Not much, barely enough to make anyone else pause. But for me, it was proof. Proof that thought could turn into substance, that an idea, carried long enough through the quiet hours of self-doubt, could be translated into something I could hold between my fingers. The weight of those few notes pressed into my palm like a secret key, and I knew from then on that money wasn't just a means, it was a message, a mirror, a test. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive in. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. I wasn't born with abundance. My childhood smelled more of iron radiators and cold apartments, of worn-out jackets passed down one winter too many, of bread bought at the discount shelf just before the lights of the store dimmed for closing. I remember my mother's hands, tired and cracked, shuffling bills across the kitchen table. I remember my father's silence, heavy and unspoken, when work was scarce. And I remember the sound of coins being dropped into a jar, a hollow echo that felt both hopeful and humiliating at once. That was my first education. Not from books, not from classrooms, but from the sharp division I could feel between us and those who had more. You notice it young, the way their shoes shine differently, the way their parents speak about summers abroad, the way their laughter carries no weight. And you tell yourself, quietly at first, I will not stay here. I tried small things in those early years. I sold candies at school, turning every coin into two, and every two into a small handful that could be hidden away. I remember the sweet, sticky scent of sugar melting into my backpack, and the thrill of exchanging it for another boy's crumpled bills. But just as quickly, I remember the teacher's stern voice, the confiscation, the humiliation of being caught. My first lesson in risk. You can make money, but you can also lose it in an instant. The difference between rich and poor, it is not only money, it is time. How you see it, how you hold it. For the poor, time is something endured, waited out like the hours of a long shift. For the rich, time is currency, a field where seeds are planted and watered. Poor mindsets live day to day. Rich mindsets live decade to decade. And yet, I did not know this then. I only knew the chill of dawn when I woke too early for a job that paid too little, the metallic taste of exhaustion in my mouth as I tried to study after work, the endless ticking of that clock reminding me that life was running away faster than I could catch it. I looked in the mirror late at night and saw someone already old, though barely grown. And in that reflection, I asked myself the question that became the fulcrum of everything. What if I never stepped beyond this? The smell of coffee would follow me everywhere. Cheap coffee in plastic cups at jobs that demanded my hours and gave back scraps. And later, stronger blends in offices where I sat longer, deeper into the night. It was always the same ritual. Papers spread across the desk, the lamp throwing sharp shadows, the pen scratching out calculations of what might be possible if only I dared. Coffee and ink, the twin perfumes of ambition in its rawest form. I made mistakes, too many to count. Investments that dissolved like smoke, partnerships that felt like promises, but ended in betrayal. I lost money, time, pride. I stared at empty accounts with the same sinking feeling I had when my father avoided speaking of work. And yet, something shifted each time. I realized that losing was not the opposite of winning. Losing was the tuition you paid for entry into the next room. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. The one shocking difference that decides your future is not intelligence. It is not education. It is not even talent. It is the relationship you have with loss. The poor mind clings to what it has, fearful of the emptiness that waits if it lets go. The rich mind risks the fall, knowing that only in the fall is the next step revealed. The poor see money as something to be preserved. The rich see money as something to be multiplied, and multiplication requires sacrifice. I remember the first time I put everything I had on the line. My hands shook as I signed the papers. The office smelled of old wood and cigarettes, the lawyer's pen scratching like a nail against glass. I knew if it went wrong, I would be stripped bare, humiliated, finished. But I also knew that if I didn't take the risk, I would stay trapped in the gray corridors of mediocrity forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ticking clock on my wall became deafening, each second an accusation, each minute a reminder that my life could either expand or collapse with this decision. I stood before the mirror, searching my own eyes for an answer, and found none. Sometimes there is no answer. Sometimes there is only the next step. And so I stepped. The morning after felt colder, sharper, as if the air itself knew what I had done. The streets outside hummed with early traffic, horns echoing off stone walls, voices of strangers rising and falling like waves. I walked through it all with a strange calm, as if the die had already been cast, and all that remained was to see how it landed. It landed not with triumph, but with pain. The first months were brutal, debt pressed down like a stone, every bill arriving like a silent enemy. I tasted failure on my tongue daily. But underneath it all, something new was growing as a resilience, a hunger, a realization that I could withstand more than I believed. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. That was the beginning of the transformation. Not the money itself, but the mindset. Not the wins, but the willingness to lose. That is the shocking difference. The poor mindset asks, what if I fail? The rich mindset asks, what if I never try? And I kept trying, again and again, with trembling hands, with sleepless nights, with the endless ticking of that clock in every office I ever sat in. Each attempt sharpened me, burned away illusions, carved into me truths that no book had ever taught. That patience is wealth, that fear is the first enemy, that time is the only true currency. I will never forget the smell of that first new office I could finally call mine. Fresh paint, leather chairs, polished wood. I walked in alone, closed the door, and sat in the silence. The window opened onto a city alive with motion, but in that moment, I heard only the steady pulse of my own heartbeat. I had crossed a line, and nothing would ever be the same. The office became my sanctuary and my prison all at once. By day, the hum of the city below filtered through the glass horns, footsteps, the murmur of strangers chasing their own small purposes. By night, only silence remained, broken by the ticking of the clock on the wall, always reminding me that every second spent was one I could never reclaim. I would sit there long after the cleaners had passed through, the faint chemical scent of disinfectant lingering in the air, my desk still lit by a single lamp. Papers spread before me, keys in a neat row on the table. Each one a promise, each one a doorway. Keys to doors I had opened, and keys to doors I had yet to find. That smell of newness, the leather, the polish, the faint trace of cardboard from unpacked boxes stayed with me. It was proof of progress, and yet, in that proof, I felt the weight of responsibility. Having something meant you could lose it. Having more meant the fall could be greater. But I had already tasted the emptiness of nothing, and I knew I could live with that. The one thing I could not live with was stagnation. Money flowed differently now. No longer coins in a jar, but wires, contracts, digits, moving silently from one account to another. And yet, even then, I found myself counting it by hand when I could, spreading bills across the desk, breathing in their sharp, metallic scent, reminding myself that behind every number there was still something tangible. I wanted to never forget that money was not just abstraction, it was fuel, it was leverage, it was time itself translated into a form you could hold. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. I hired my first assistant in those days. She was young, eager, her voice carrying the brightness I had long since lost. I remember the sound of her typing in the other room, steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat for the office. Papers moved faster, meetings were scheduled, doors opened. But with each new structure came new cracks. A team does not only amplify strength, it also multiplies weakness. Trust became both currency and gamble. Some proved loyal, others proved costly. I learned to watch eyes as much as I watched numbers. There were mornings I woke before dawn, my body heavy, my mind racing. The streets outside were still, the lamps casting pale yellow circles on the asphalt, the air sharp with the chill of dew. I would walk alone, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness, and think about the invisible line between those who controlled their time and those who sold it. Every step reminded me I wanted ownership, not permission. And so, I kept building. Partnerships, ventures, risks that seemed reckless to those on the outside. I remember one deal in particular, the room crowded with men in suits, the air thick with cologne and smoke. Their voices overlapped, confident, calculated, and I sat quietly, listening. The poor mindset speaks the loudest, needing to be heard, to prove itself. The rich mindset listens, gathers, strikes at the precise moment when silence has carved the space for it. That night, I left the room with more than I had entered, not just in contracts signed, but in the lesson that patience is sharper than aggression. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. Still, every step upward came with its shadow. Success brought envy. Growth brought complexity. And with complexity came sleepless nights. I began to dream in numbers, figures scrolling endlessly across my mind, balances tilting, risks weighing heavy. The sound of the clock in my office at night became unbearable at times, each tick a reminder that I was burning through my most precious asset. I would stare at the mirror in the bathroom, fluorescent light harsh on my face, and see the fatigue carving lines too early. The mirror never lies. It showed me the cost. But in those same reflections, I saw resolve. Riches were never about luxury, though the trappings of it came. They were about space, the freedom to think, to move, to choose. Poor is a cage, even if gilded by distraction. Rich is the key. I bought my first building then. The papers were thick, the lawyer's voice dry as he read each line. When I held the keys in my hand afterward, cold and heavy, I turned them over and over, feeling the grooves cut into metal. A key is a symbol. To open, to close, to guard, to reveal. I stood before the door that would soon be mine, and listened to the sound of the lock turning. The echo of the click was louder than applause. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. Inside, the rooms were empty, hollow, dust floating in the shafts of afternoon light. My footsteps echoed off the bare walls, and yet I could already smell the future fresh paint, coffee brewing in break rooms, the murmur of people who would come to work there, chasing their own versions of freedom. That emptiness was full of possibility. Poor minds see emptiness as loss. Rich minds see it as potential. The difference, the shocking difference, is not external. It is not where you start, not the education stamped on your diploma, not the connections passed down to you. It is internal. It is how you face time, loss, risk, and silence. The poor mindset fears the mirror. The rich mindset searches it. And even now, as I write these words, I hear the clock ticking in another room, reminding me of the same truth I learned in that small apartment as a boy. Time is slipping, and what you do with it is the only real decision that matters. The days began to blur into one another, each one carrying the same rhythm. The unlocking of doors in the early light, the hum of machines powering up, the first scent of coffee rising from the break room. I would stand at the window of my office, looking down at the street where people hurried with briefcases and bags, their faces tight with routine, their bodies locked into schedules they did not own. From above, it looked like a current, an endless river of footsteps, flowing in directions dictated not by choice, but by necessity. I told myself I had escaped that current, but the truth was more complicated. The higher you rise, the more invisible currents you discover, forces that pull and tug at you just as strongly as poverty ever did. Investors, partners, markets, laws, each one a hidden hand steering your time. Freedom was never pure. Freedom was a negotiation. At night, I often returned to the silence of my building when everyone else had gone. The air would still carry the faint perfume of cologne and perfume from the people who worked there, mixed with the smell of paper and electronics cooling after a long day. The hallways echoed with my footsteps. The elevator doors opened with a metallic sigh. And in my office, the desk lamp once again threw its circle of light, illuminating contracts, notebooks, and a mirror I had hung on the wall. That mirror became my confessor. I would sit and stare into it when the numbers felt too heavy, when the debts pressed too sharply, when the weight of other people's salaries rested on my shoulders. The mirror showed me not the businessman others saw, but the boy who once counted coins in a jar, the young man who sold candies and got caught, the dreamer who walked empty streets at dawn. And it asked me the same question every time. Are you building this for yourself, or are you becoming another prisoner of what you sought to escape? The sound of keys always accompanied those reflections. They lay on my desk in a small pile, cool and metallic, catching the lamplight. Office keys, building keys, car keys, safe keys. I would pick them up one by one, feeling their weight. They represented access, ownership, possibility. But they also represented chains. The poor mindset sees keys as locks, barriers to envy. The rich mindset sees keys as tools. But the danger is forgetting that even too many tools can become burdens. I began to learn that discipline was not only about doing more, but also about letting go. I let go of ventures that drained without giving. I let go of people who smiled too quickly and betrayed just as quickly. I let go of distractions that promised wealth but offered only noise. Each decision was painful, like carving away pieces of myself, but the silence that followed was cleaner, sharper. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like it supports the journey. There was one winter when everything seemed ready to collapse. The markets dipped, contracts fell through, partners pulled out. I remember the cold in those months, the sting of air on my face as I walked between meetings, the burn of frost on my hands even inside leather gloves. The city felt hostile, every sound sharper, every light harsher. Bills piled like snowdrifts, rumors spread, Enemies circled, waiting for weakness. And in the mirror, I saw fear for the first time in years. But it was in that winter that I also learned the most important truth. Resilience is not about never bending. It is about bending so far you think you will break, and then realizing you haven't. I sat in my office one night, the heating system rattling weakly, the glass fogging from my breath. The only sound was the relentless tick of the clock. I closed my eyes and let the rhythm wash over me. Tick, debt. Tick, loss. Tick, humiliation. Tick, time. Each second felt like an enemy. And then, slowly, I realized it was not an enemy at all. It was a reminder that nothing is permanent. Not failure, not success. Everything moves. Everything changes. I survived that winter. Barely. The poor mindset would have quit, retreated, clung to safety. The rich mindset saw the storm as tuition, the price of entry into the next level of the game. When spring came, the city smelled of rain on stone, of blossoms on trees, of warm asphalt after the first heat. And in that scent, I felt reborn. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. From then on, I carried winter with me. Every time I walked into a room filled with confident faces and polished shoes, I remembered the sting of frost and the fear in the mirror. Every time I signed a contract or turned a key, I remembered the silence of those nights when I thought everything was lost. That memory kept me grounded. It reminded me that wealth is not a ladder you climb once, but a staircase that can crumble beneath you at any moment if you forget what it is made of. And what is it made of? Time. Always time. Money is time borrowed. Wealth is time reclaimed. Poverty is time stolen. The shocking difference is not the size of your account, but the size of your horizon. The poor look at days. The rich look at decades. The wisest look beyond even that. I began to build not only for myself, but for something beyond me. Family. Legacy. The faces of those who would come after me. The thought of children walking through doors I had once unlocked, of their hands holding the same keys, of their reflections in mirrors I once stared into. That thought gave meaning to the long nights, the endless risks, the scars left by failure. And yet, even as legacy grew in my mind, the ticking clock never softened. It kept reminding me that time is not ours to keep. It is only ours to use. And every second I spent chasing wealth was also a second I could not spend elsewhere. One evening, I turned off the lamp earlier than usual. I left the office while the city was still alive with voices and laughter. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts from a vendor on the corner, of perfume from passers-by, of rain beginning to fall lightly on the pavement. For the first time in a long while, I walked without rushing, without planning, without calculating. And in that moment, I realized, perhaps the richest thing any of us can own is simply a piece of time, fully lived, fully felt. The mirror would still wait for me the next morning. The keys would still be there. The clock would still tick. But that night, I tasted freedom in its purest form. I woke the next morning with the faint memory of rain still in the air, the scent of damp stone rising from the streets below my window. The city was quieter than usual, muffled, as though wrapped in a blanket. I lay there for a moment, listening to the drip of water from the eaves, the distant growl of an early bus engine, the shuffle of footsteps on wet pavement. And for the first time in years, I did not feel the sharp urge to rush, to leap from bed, to race the clock. Instead, I let the seconds pass, each one like a small gift rather than a threat. But the habit of years is not broken in a day. Soon enough, the familiar pull returned, the need to move, to act, to build. I dressed slowly, pulling on the suit that had become my armor. smoothing the fabric, adjusting the tie until the man in the mirror looked composed enough to face the world. Yet beneath the polished surface, the same boy still stared back, the one who counted coins in the dim light of a kitchen table, the one who whispered promises to himself while others slept. The mirror never lets you forget. When I arrived at the office, the building carried the smell of damp wool coats and wet umbrellas. My team moved through the halls with the efficient clatter of heels and the murmur of voices discussing deadlines. Phones rang, printers hummed, doors clicked open and shut. It was the sound of business breathing, the pulse of something larger than myself. I paused in the lobby, watching them all move, each with their own small universe of worries and ambitions. And I wondered how many of them understood the price of time, the cost of choosing safety over risk. Upstairs, the keys waited on my desk, cold and heavy as always. I picked them up, turned them over in my hand, let their edges press into my skin. They reminded me that everything I held could vanish, that ownership was temporary, that access was only as secure as my next decision. I placed them back down gently, like a ritual, and began the day. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. The meetings that day blurred together, voices layered over one another, contracts thick with clauses, charts projected on screens glowing with numbers. But between the noise, I found moments of silence in my own thoughts. The poor mindset seeks escape and distraction. The rich mindset seeks clarity and reflection. I listened more than I spoke, traced patterns in the data, searched for the threads that others overlooked. Opportunity is always quiet. It whispers in corners, while noise drowns the untrained ear. That evening, after the last meeting ended and the building emptied, I walked alone through the corridors. The air was still, the faint hum of electricity the only sound. I pushed open the door to the rooftop and stepped out into the night. The city stretched before me, a tapestry of lights and shadows. Cars streamed like veins of fire, windows glowed like constellations, and above it all, the sky was black, infinite, unbothered. I inhaled deeply, the air cold in my lungs, and felt both small and immense. The shocking difference, I realized again, is vision. The poor mindset sees what is immediate bills, shifts, weekends, relief. The rich mindset stretches its gaze, years, decades, lifetimes. The rich mind accepts the small sacrifices today to claim a horizon tomorrow. The poor mind clings to comfort now and pays the silent cost later. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. I remembered my father then, his silence at the table, the way his shoulders carried weight. He never spoke aloud. He worked hard, harder than most, but his vision never extended beyond the next payday, the next winter's heating bill, the next small moment of survival. He lived inside days, never inside decades. And so the cycle repeated, unbroken. I swore to myself, standing on that rooftop, that I would not let silence or fear confine me to that same horizon. The following months tested that oath. Deals came and went. Fortunes rose and fell like tides. Some mornings I woke with the taste of triumph, others with the bitterness of failure. The mirror bore witness to both the glow in my eyes after a win, the hollowness in my cheeks after a loss. Yet in each reflection I began to see less of the boy and more of the man who had chosen to step into storms rather than hide from them. There was one deal in particular that nearly broke me. The numbers were vast, the risk enormous. Advisors urged caution, partners warned of disaster. But I felt it, the quiet whisper of opportunity beneath the noise. I signed. The days that followed were agony. The markets turned, whispers of collapse spread, and for weeks I carried the weight of ruin in my chest. I walked the streets at night, the city lights blurring in my tired eyes, the smell of exhaust and rain filling my lungs, asking myself if I had finally gambled too far. And then, against the tide, the breakthrough came. The deal turned, the tide shifted, the numbers swung in my favor. One morning, I opened the reports and saw the truth. Not only had I survived, but I had grown. The relief was almost painful, a release so sharp it left me trembling. I closed my eyes, pressed my palms against the desk, and whispered into the silence. This is why we risk. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. It was never about greed. It was about freedom, the freedom to step beyond the cycle, to claim time as my own, to give back not just scraps, but abundance. And yet, even in victory, the ticking clock never stopped. It echoed through every triumph, every loss, reminding me that all of it, every deal, every risk, every note of currency was only borrowed against the inevitable. I began to see wealth not as accumulation, but as translation. Translation of hours into possibilities. Translation of risks into lessons. Translation of silence into meaning. Poor mindsets count money. Rich mindsets count time. And so, I kept walking forward, through failures, through triumphs, through the endless corridors of offices filled with the smell of paper and ink, through nights lit only by the glow of a desk lamp, through mornings that carried both frost and promise. Always the clock, always the mirror, always the keys. The three silent companions of every step in my journey. And in each of them, the same reflection. That the future is not given, it is chosen. There were mornings when the city felt like it was holding its breath. I would leave my apartment before dawn, the streets wet with last night's rain, the shop shutters still drawn, the air carrying the metallic tang of tram lines and the faint sweetness of bread, baking in some unseen bakery. My shoes clicked against the pavement, each step a reminder that I was moving faster than the world around me. Those moments were intoxicating. When the city still slept, I felt as though time belonged to me alone. But by the time I reached the office, the illusion dissolved. Phones were already ringing, screens flashing, voices raised with urgency. Success, I discovered, makes you busier, not freer. The poor mindset imagines riches as escape, an endless vacation of beaches and leisure. The rich mindset learns quickly. Wealth is responsibility, and freedom is not absence of work, but ownership of it. Inside the office, the smell of coffee always greeted me first, sharp and bitter, followed by the low hum of printers and the shuffle of papers moving between hands. I could tell the state of the day by those first scents and sounds. A calm morning smelled of fresh brew and sounded of laughter across desks. A storm brewing smelled of sweat and burnt nerves, the silence of concentration broken only by clipped conversations behind closed doors. One winter's day, I remember sitting at my desk long after dark, the lamp throwing shadows across contracts that refused to balance. The clock ticked louder with every second, as though mocking me. On the desk lay 3 keys, to my home, my office, and my car. I held them in my palm, turned them over, let them clink against one another. It struck me then how much of life we measure in keys. As children, we are given none. As adults, we accumulate them like trophies, and at the end, someone else takes them away. Keys are both proof of progress and reminders of impermanence. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. I lost people along the way. Partners who left when storms grew too fierce. Friends who could not understand the distance I created between myself and the comfort of ordinary living. Some said I had changed, and they were right. You cannot stare into the mirror night after night, listening to the relentless march of the clock without being altered. Change is not betrayal, it is the price of growth. Still, I carried guilt. On quiet nights, when the office was empty and the city outside buzzed with laughter I no longer shared, I felt the ache of sacrifice. Wealth asks for things beyond money. It asks for hours you cannot reclaim, for relationships stretched thin, for solitude so deep it sometimes feels like exile. The poor mindset believes success is addition, adding wealth, adding comfort, adding status. The rich mindset knows it is subtraction, subtracting distraction, subtracting weakness, subtracting everything that keeps you from the sharp core of your vision. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. There came a season when I nearly broke under the weight of it all. Deals tangled like wires, debts stacked like bricks, and the more I tried to move, the heavier everything became. Nights blurred into mornings without sleep, my body trembling from too much coffee, my eyes burning from screens that refused to close. I began to fear the mirror. Its honesty too sharp, its reflection too merciless. One night, in the hollow silence of my office, I reached a breaking point. I turned off the lamp, sat in the dark, and let the ticking clock pierce the stillness. Each second struck like a hammer against glass. I thought of walking away, of abandoning the weight, of slipping quietly back into the anonymity I had once escaped. For a moment, that thought felt like freedom. But then, in the darkness, I remembered the boy at the kitchen table, the coins glinting under weak light, the vow whispered in silence. I will not stay here. That memory burned brighter than my exhaustion. I turned the lamp back on, took the keys into my hand, and pressed them so hard into my palm that they left marks in my skin. Pain reminded me I was still alive, still capable of carrying more. I picked up the pen and signed another page. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. The deal that nearly destroyed me became the one that elevated me beyond what I had imagined possible. That is the paradox no one tells you. The line between ruin and triumph is paper thin, and you only know which side you're on when you've already crossed it. Poor mindsets see that line and step back. Rich mindsets see that line and step forward, trembling but unwilling to retreat. Afterward, I learned to breathe differently. I stopped fearing the mirror. I began to welcome the ticking clock, no longer as a threat, but as a reminder. Time is not infinite, but it is enough if you use it with purpose. I kept the 3 keys on my desk, always within sight, symbols of both burden and blessing. They reminded me daily, ownership is temporary, but courage is permanent. And as I write these words now, I can still smell that night, the faint trace of ink drying on contracts, the bitterness of coffee cooling in a forgotten cup, the metallic scent of keys pressed into skin. It was the night I understood that wealth is not about possession, but about endurance. Not about what you hold, but about what you dare to carry until it transforms you. There are nights that etch themselves into your memory, not because of triumph, not because of collapse, but because of the stillness between the two. One such night found me walking through the city after midnight, the streets slick with rain, neon lights reflecting in long streaks across the asphalt. The air was heavy with the smell of wet concrete, exhaust, and the faint sweetness of roasted nuts from a lone vendor who hadn't yet packed away his cart. I walked slowly, deliberately, as though each step was carrying me deeper into the truth I had been avoiding. The truth was simple. Success is not a peak you climb once and stand upon forever. Success is a moving horizon. Each time you draw close, it shifts, receding further, asking you to keep walking. The poor mindset looks for an arrival, a finish line, a place where work ceases and comfort reigns. The rich mindset accepts that there is no finish line, only movement, only evolution, only the next horizon. I returned to my office that night and did not turn on the overhead light. I wanted the room to remain in shadow, illuminated only by the desk lamp, the golden circle that had become my companion through countless hours. On the wall hung the mirror. I stood before it, rain dripping from my coat, my reflection fractured by droplets still clinging to my hair. For a long moment, I simply stared. And then I spoke aloud, my voice startling in the silence. "What are you building this for?" The question echoed. The clock answered with its relentless ticking. The keys on the desk gleamed faintly in the lamplight. I sat down and let the silence envelop me. Business, I realized, was no longer only about survival, no longer only about escaping the poverty of my beginnings. It had become something larger, something almost spiritual. Each deal, each risk, each sleepless night was a kind of confession, a laying bare of what I truly valued. And what I valued most was time. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. Time. The one currency no one can counterfeit, no one can hoard, no one can reclaim once spent. Poor minds sell their time cheaply, believing it renewable. Rich minds guard it, invest it, shape it, knowing its scarcity is the source of all value. I thought of the endless hours I had once sold at low wages, my body exhausted, my mind dulled, my spirit shrinking. And I compared it to the hours I now spent, still exhausted, but burning with vision, carrying weight by choice rather than by command. The difference was not ease, but ownership. Weeks later, I made a decision that startled even myself. I began to step back from certain ventures, not because they failed, but because they consumed without giving meaning. The poor mindset clings to everything out of fear of loss. The rich mindset learns to let go, to cut away what does not align with purpose. Each departure hurt, each signature of withdrawal felt like betrayal. Yet with every release came a strange relief, a quiet strength. The seasons shifted. Spring arrived with the smell of blossoms carried through open office windows, the air warmer, the days longer. My team worked late into the evenings, their voices drifting down the halls, their laughter mingling with the tapping of keyboards. I would pause outside their doors, listening. For them, this was work. For me, it was proof that a vision held long enough can pull others into its orbit. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. And yet, in the midst of growth, solitude deepened. The higher I climbed, the fewer there were who could understand the view. Friends spoke of weekends, of hobbies, of leisure. I nodded, smiled, but inside I felt the widening distance. To chase horizons is to accept loneliness. The poor mindset fears that loneliness and clings to the crowd. The rich mindset endures it, knowing that solitude is the crucible where vision is forged. There were nights when the silence pressed too heavily. I would leave the office and drive aimlessly, the city lights blurring into streaks through the windshield, the low hum of the engine steady beneath me. Gasoline, leather, the faint trace of perfume left by a passenger long gone. The car itself seemed a vessel of memory. And as the road unwound before me, I thought not of profits or losses, but of the child I once was, walking to school with worn shoes, pockets empty, dreams unspoken. I carried him with me still, and every risk I took was a promise to him. You will not remain there. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. The shocking difference I understood more clearly with every passing year was not wealth itself, but the courage to embrace transformation. Poor mindsets resist change, clinging to familiarity even when it is suffocating. Rich mindsets seek transformation, knowing that to remain the same is to decay. Every mirror I faced showed me a man in flux, never complete, never finished, always becoming. And through it all, the clock ticked. It ticked through victories and failures, through laughter and silence, through rain-soaked nights and sunlit mornings. The ticking was the only constant, the reminder that the horizon always moved, that time was both my fiercest enemy and my greatest ally. One evening, as I locked the office door and felt the keys heavy in my hand, I realized the buildings, the contracts, the accounts, none of it was permanent. But the mindset that carried me through storms, the resilience etched into me by failure and risk, that was mine, unshakable. And that, I knew, was the true wealth I had been chasing all along. I remember a summer evening when the city pulsed with heat. The asphalt radiated warmth, the air smelled faintly of gasoline and roasted food from carts that lined the sidewalks, and the sound of laughter rose from cafes where people lingered late into the night. I walked among them, my suit jacket draped over my arm, my shirt collar loosened. But even then, I was not part of their ease. My mind carried ledgers, contracts, decisions that could tilt entire futures. Around me, life unfolded in small joys, cold drinks, shared stories, music drifting from open windows. Inside me, a storm of calculation never ceased. The poor mindset envies those small joys and believes wealth is the power to indulge in them endlessly. The rich mindset learns that indulgence without purpose is emptiness disguised as pleasure. I smiled at the laughter I heard, but kept walking, my thoughts fixed not on the evening's warmth, but on the chill of mornings yet to come, on the ticking of the clock that would resume its steady rhythm long after the music faded. That night I returned to the office, though there was no need. The hallways smelled faintly of cleaning supplies, the polished floors reflecting the dim emergency lights. I unlocked the door, the metallic click echoing louder than it should, and stepped into the silence of my sanctuary. The lamp flared to life, casting its familiar circle on the desk. The keys clinked as I set them down, a sound that had become ritual, a kind of punctuation to every day. I sat and let the stillness wash over me. There, in that silence, I was most myself. No voices pressing, no expectations crowding, no noise but the faint hum of the building's air system and the insistent tick of the clock. I took a deep breath, the air carrying the smell of paper, ink, and faint leather from the chair beneath me. These were the scents of my life, as familiar as the smell of my childhood kitchen had once been. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. There are memories that arrive unbidden in such moments. I thought of my mother's hands again, cracked from labor, sorting coins on a chipped wooden table. I thought of my father's silence, heavy as stone, when he came home without wages. Those images lived in me like shadows, and no matter how far I traveled from them, they followed. They were not burdens anymore. They were anchors, reminders of why I endured the loneliness of nights like this. I poured myself a glass of water and stared at my reflection in its surface, distorted, rippling, but still undeniably mine. The mirror on the wall echoed the same truth. My face carried lines now, carved not by years alone, but by choices, by risks, by endless nights of calculation. I touched the glass as though to test whether the reflection was real. The poor mindset fears the reflection, avoids it, cloaks itself in denial. The rich mindset confronts it, accepts the scars as proof of survival. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. The following months became a blur of expansion. New ventures opened. New hands reached for mine in partnership. My days filled with handshakes, signatures, the smell of fresh ink drying on contracts that would alter more than just my own path. Yet with every success came the whisper of doubt. Was I steering this ship, or had I become its passenger? Wealth can deceive. It can make you believe you own it, when in truth, it owns you. I tried to balance. I tried to find moments outside the endless tide of business. A walk at dawn, when the world smelled of dew and the first bread baking. A visit to my parents, now older, their eyes both proud and cautious, unsure of the man their son had become. In their small home, the air still carried the familiar scent of cooking oil and worn fabric, unchanged by time. Sitting there, I felt both the distance I had traveled and the bridge I could never fully cross back. One evening, I arrived home to an apartment filled with silence, the kind of silence that presses against the walls, reminding you of what is missing. I stood in the doorway, listening for sounds that were not there. No laughter, no voices, only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant noise of traffic below. Success had given me rooms filled with light, with polished surfaces, with space. But it had also carved away presence. The poor mindset clings to company for fear of solitude. The rich mindset endures solitude for the sake of vision. But even vision, at times, feels like a cold companion. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. The shocking difference between rich and poor mindset became clearest in those moments. Poverty teaches you to seek comfort wherever it can be found. Cheap laughter, fleeting distraction, temporary relief. Wealth, if misunderstood, can turn into the same trap, only gilded with more expensive distractions. The true richness lies in resisting both illusions, in learning to sit in silence, in accepting the mirror's reflection, in using time not to escape, but to build. One night, unable to sleep, I drove through the city again. The roads were empty, the streetlights casting pale circles on the asphalt. The car's engine hummed steadily, the leather seat warm beneath me. I lowered the window and let the air rush in, cool against my skin, carrying the smell of wet earth and distant smoke. The city felt like it belonged to me alone, its vastness both humbling and exhilarating. I realized then, freedom is not the absence of chains, but the choice of which chains you carry. And I had chosen mine willingly. I returned home as the first light of dawn stretched across the horizon. I stood at the window, the sky painted in shades of pale blue and pink, the world stirring slowly below. And as I watched, I felt the weight of the keys in my pocket, heavy, grounding. They were proof of access, of ownership, of burdens. But more than that, they were symbols of the boy who once had none. The boy who looked at locked doors and wondered what was beyond them. The clock ticked in the background, steady, eternal. The mirror waited in the next room, ready to show me who I had become. And I knew that tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, the horizon would keep moving, calling me forward. Because wealth is not arrival. Wealth is movement. And the one shocking difference that decides your future is whether you are willing to keep moving, even when the path is lonely, even when the clock is merciless, even when the mirror shows you more scars than smiles. And so I kept moving. There are mornings when the light feels heavier than the dark. I woke to one of those mornings, the blinds half drawn, sunlight slicing across the room in golden stripes. Dust drifted lazily in the beams, and the faint hum of the city already pulsed beyond the window. I sat on the edge of the bed, my body heavy, my mind restless. In the quiet, I heard the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, steady, indifferent. Each sound was a reminder that time waited for no one, not for triumph, not for fatigue, not for doubt. I showered, the water scalding against my skin, steam filling the room, carrying with it the sterile scent of soap. I dressed in silence, knotting my tie with automatic precision, each motion practiced until it was no longer thought, but ritual. The mirror above the dresser reflected a man composed, but beneath the suit, beneath the polished exterior, there was still the boy who had once stared at coins on a table and whispered vows into the emptiness. The drive to the office that day was longer than usual, traffic dense, the air thick with exhaust and impatience. Horns blared, engines rumbled, voices shouted across intersections. I rolled the window down, letting the noise pour in, letting the smells of asphalt and gasoline remind me of the city's ceaseless movement. Everyone around me was rushing, pressed by time, caught in currents they did not control. And I wondered how many of them realized that the difference between freedom and captivity lay not in the cars they drove, but in the way they saw time. At the office, the lobby smelled of fresh polish and brewed coffee. Shoes clicked against marble floors, conversations overlapped in fragments, deadlines, meetings, obligations. I moved among them like a ghost, my presence acknowledged, but never fully grasped. My mind was elsewhere, always 2 steps ahead, already in the silence of the office upstairs, where the real decisions waited. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. In my office, the familiar circle of lamplight welcomed me. The keys clinked as I set them down, their metallic weight grounding me. Papers spread across the desk, numbers dancing in ink, each one carrying both promise and threat. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the rhythm of the clock fill the room. Tick decision, tick risk, tick reward, tick loss. The sound became almost musical, a metronome guiding the symphony of my days. That week brought challenges. A partnership faltered, trust fractured, promises revealed as lies. The poor mindset collapses under betrayal, using it as proof that risk is folly. The rich mindset accepts betrayal as inevitability, as part of the tuition one pays to enter the halls of freedom. I swallowed the bitterness, stared into the mirror, and asked myself, will you let this break you, or will you let it forge you? The reflection gave no answer, but the silence gave space for resolve. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. I pushed forward. Meetings stretched late, the air growing thick with exhaustion, the smell of stale coffee lingering long after cups were emptied. My team's faces showed strain, but also determination. They looked to me not only for direction, but for belief, for proof that the storm we navigated would not drown us. Leadership, I learned, is not about command. It is about carrying fear without showing it, about letting your silence become their confidence. There were nights I returned home too tired to eat, collapsing into bed with my suit still half on. The room smelled faintly of fabric and paper, the air heavy with stillness. I would wake hours later, the clock glowing in the darkness, reminding me of what I had lost and gained. The poor mindset fears exhaustion, seeks comfort as escape. The rich mindset accepts exhaustion as evidence that the hours spent are seeds, invisible now, but destined to grow. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. Seasons passed. Autumn arrived with the scent of leaves burning in distant yards, the chill of mornings biting sharper, the city painted in gold and rust. I walked through parks on weekends, watching families gather, children laughing, leaves crunching beneath their feet. Their joy was simple, pure, unmeasured. And I wondered, had I traded too much of that simplicity for the endless climb? The mirror inside me answered, "There is no wealth without trade. Every choice is exchange." I thought of legacy then, more often than before. Of what would remain when the clock finally ceased, when the keys slipped from my hand for the last time. Would it be numbers and accounts, or would it be something quieter, more enduring, the lessons etched into the hearts of those who came after me? The poor mindset clings to possession. The rich mindset builds legacy. Legacy is not money left behind. It is time given, wisdom shared, courage demonstrated. One evening, I found myself in the old neighborhood where I had grown up. The air smelled the same baking bread, damp pavement, faint traces of smoke. The buildings looked smaller now, worn by years, but still standing. I walked the streets slowly, listening to the echoes of my childhood footsteps, feeling the ghosts of the boy who once dreamed in shadows. I paused outside the building where I had first counted coins on a table, the window still cracked, the paint still peeling. For a moment, I felt the weight of the years collapse, as though time had folded in on itself. The clock ticked inside me louder than ever. The mirror of memory showed me the same eyes, only older. The keys in my pocket reminded me of doors I had opened, but also of doors that would forever remain closed. And yet, as I stood there, I realized the boy and the man were not separate. They were the same, bound by the one shocking difference that had carried them both forward, the refusal to surrender to fear, the courage to risk, the vision to see beyond days into decades. And so I walked away, not from the past, but with it. The night air smelled of rain beginning to fall. The city lights shimmered in the wet pavement, and the horizon, as always, moved further ahead, waiting. The final years of my journey have been quieter, though no less demanding. The offices still hum, the contracts still arrive, the clock still ticks with the same merciless rhythm, but the weight I place upon each sound has shifted. I rise earlier now, not to race against time, but to walk beside it. The mornings carry the smell of fresh air through open windows, the rustle of trees, the distant call of birds beyond the city. I savor these moments the way I once savored profit, because I understand now that wealth is measured not only in accumulation, but in presence. When I walk through my buildings today, I hear more than the echo of my own footsteps. I hear laughter in corridors, ideas exchanged across desks, the voices of people who have chosen to walk this path with me. The smell of coffee drifts from break rooms, papers shuffle, keyboards tap. These sounds remind me that I did not build only for myself, but for others, for lives that intersected with mine, for families that grew because I dared to risk, for futures that now exist because I refused to remain where I began. And yet, I never let myself forget the silence of those early nights, when the mirror showed me only a boy with empty pockets and a fire in his eyes. That boy walks with me still, whispering the same question I heard in every reflection, every ticking second. What are you building this for? The answer has changed. It was once survival. Then it became ambition. Then legacy. Now it is simply time. Time to breathe. Time to give. time to watch others rise. The poor mindset spends time as though it were endless. The rich mindset saves and invests it. But the wisest mindset learns to give it away. To family, to meaning, to the world beyond the self. I often sit at the window of my office in the evenings, the city lights shimmering like constellations across the earth. Cars stream like veins of fire below. Voices drift up faintly from the streets. And somewhere, always, a clock ticks. I hold the keys in my hand, their edges worn smooth with years of use. And I see them not as symbols of ownership, but as reminders of responsibility. They will pass on one day, as all keys do. What matters is not the doors I unlocked, but the courage I showed in turning them. And when I look into the mirror now, I no longer search for answers. I see scars, lines, triumphs, failures, all woven into one face. I see the boy and the man together. I see someone who dared to lose again and again, until loss itself became strength. If you stayed with me until the end, subscribe, like, and comment, so that these words will find you again tomorrow night. Because in the end, the one shocking difference that decides your future is not money, not power, not status. It is the way you face time, whether you fear the clock or walk with it, whether you see in the mirror a prisoner of the past or the architect of the future, whether you treat each key as a burden or as a doorway. I chose to walk with time. I chose to face the mirror. I chose to turn the keys. And that choice has made all the difference.